What's going on, guys? My name is Tommy. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another episode of Wednesday Afternoon Worship. Today on the channel, we start a 4-part mini-series at the request of our brother in arms, Adam Spain, at the end of Planar Crossroads. Specifically, we'll be talking about the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, seen as monsters in Bestiary 6, with expansive lore released in the Book of the Damned. I wasn't exactly sure what order I wanted to do these in. Did I want to do them in CR order, biblical order, maybe, I don't know, Metallica order? Rather than any of those, I'm going to record these in the order in which I fought these horsemen. And the first of the 4 horsemen that we encountered was the Horseman of War, Zuriel. As such, she leads the charge in this video miniseries. Before we get to that, though, 2 announcements. Today, I want to personally reach out and thank Mr. Chris Avery. I don't know if you'll see this, I don't know if you're a subscriber, for his input and advice that he gave me with regards to Krampus's regression ability. Of course, on Christmas Eve, I put my players through a one-shot where they fought Krampus, which you can see right here. He has a funny little ability that's kind of grayly worded, and I wanted to see if I could find some rules as written, or at least another GM's advice on how to use it. Chris, thank you very much, buddy. The second announcement I have before we dive in here, as you guys know, we've rolled over 212 subscribers, and that means it is time, once again, for another giveaway. Specifically, we'll release a video announcing that giveaway on Thursday. I'm super stoked to bring it to you guys. You're going to love it. Look for it. Anywho, without further ado, let's dig into the 4 horsemen, shall we? So, in the last book of the New Testament of the Bible, the book of Revelations, the 4 horsemen are these 4 beings that ride out on red, white, black, and pale horses. The Christian apocalyptic vision of these guys is that the 4 horsemen are set to a divine apocalypse on the world as harbingers of the last judgment. The horseman we're talking about today is the horseman Zuriel, and on Earth that is the rider of the 2nd horse, often pictured holding his sword upward as though ready for battle, riding out on a horse colored sometimes red, sometimes specifically fiery red. To quote the book of Revelations, "When he broke the 2nd seal, I heard the 2nd living creature say, 'Come,' and another, a red horse, went out, and to him who sat on it was granted to take peace from the earth, and that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him." In Pathfinder, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are the greatest of the daemons who rule the blighted plain of Abaddon. Each of these monstrously powerful evil demigods is a unique physical personification of one of the 4 concepts of apocalyptic events, those being death, famine, pestilence, and war. Only 4 horsemen can exist at any given time, though whether their claim to that status is granted by the ascent of the other horsemen, or by Abaddon itself, or maybe even a rumored 5th progenitor horseman, or some sort of other deific being, remains a mystery. While the number remains exclusive, horsemen can and have died and been replaced, slain by other demon lords, vengeful gods, demonic harbingers, even outsiders from within their own courts, or in rarer cases, their own siblings amongst the 4. Every one of the horsemen was once a mortal whose soul transitioned into the form of a daemon at some point after their death. The 4 horsemen divide Abaddon amongst themselves, and within each of their respective apocalyptic realms on Abaddon, each horseman holds godlike powers and exerts control both actively and subconsciously over the surrounding landscape and its nightmarish denizens. Each horseman actively fosters their own cult and even grants spells to clerics pledged to their name, although the horsemen see their worshippers as more of useful idiots condemned to oblivion upon death, despite any aid the cultists might grant the horsemen in carrying out their will. At first glance, Zuriel seems a triumphant, angelic figure standing about 20 feet tall with ivory skin, flowing golden hair, and a flawless and powerful body cloaked in a coil of immaculate silk with the wings of a blue-black raven. She appears as a personification of glory from on high, an awe-inspiring goddess of war, but when you get a little closer, the impression quickly fades away. Her eyes are mirrored and black as onyx, and they bleed constantly, with rivulets of blood running down her cheeks and falling to the ground, leaving trails of blood wherever she goes. When she smiles, she reveals a mouth full of jagged, razor-sharp fangs, more fitting for something like a shark or a dragon than anything that was ever humanoid. Zuriel, as every other horseman of war dating back to the first, wields a great sword called Lamentation of the Faithless, which is said to be the corrupted blade of an ancient celestial, possibly even the stolen sword of Meliktos the Peacock Angel. Regardless of where it came from, the exact origins of the Black Blade, yeah, I said it, Black Blade, all you magi out there who like to run around with intelligent swords, yeah, Zuriel's got one, have been lost to the dark eddies of history, and the touch of war has long since consumed the sword's original identity and nature. Touch of war is probably a huge understatement, though, because more entities have borne the title of Horsemen of War than any of the other three horsemen, which is only fitting for such a violent role. Zuriel, however, is reported to have held the title of Horseman of War longer than any previous horseman, though it's unclear whether this is a matter of record or a deliberate distortion on her part. Certainly, very few can, or maybe even are willing to say who the previous horseman was, though it's widely told that Zuriel slew him at the summit of the Cinder Furnace. Zuriel is thought to have been once a mortal paladin excommunicated for heresy. Anger and a lust for revenge drove her to elevate herself from her low rank to a general and then eventually to an empress, and she demanded the crucifixion of every member of her former faith, from Hierophant to the common lay believer. When her death came, not on the battlefield, but at the hands of an assassin, it just simply opened up another chapter in her conquests, her soul being condemned to Abaddon, working up the ranks of the daemons, and now leading them in battle as the Horsemen of War. Zuriel makes open mockery of the angelic and often plays upon celestial thematic elements in her warped and destructive interactions with mortals, awing both the misguided and those fully aware of her nature in the process. Zuriel's cults often portray her not as a paragon of conquest, but as a being promising righteous victory or the purity of a martyr's death. The impure are put to the sword, the infidels are butchered, the heretics are killed, and the others are swept below a tide of steel. The horseman, of course, smiles and guides the hand of each and every killer before claiming those killers as well. This is bread and butter to Zuriel, often even going as far as to other deities. She commands the forces of Abaddon, and at any one time, no less than half of the forces of Abaddon are employed in mercenary service across the multiverse. Throughout her history, Zuriel has repeatedly tempted mortal sovereigns into damning bargains, offering them the aid of her armies to expand their nations or to save them when they face impossible odds, and in every case, Abaddon's fiends adhere to their bargains only so long as they care to do so. They might serve various abyssal lords, archdevils, or really honestly anyone who's going to be willing to purchase their service. In every case, the price is steep, requiring living mortals or souls, or granting the mercenaries the right to consume the souls of their enemies upon the fields of battle. The rules of negotiation are often entirely different on the mortal plane. When her armies march upon it, allies will often fall victim to absurdly cheap and ultimately voided bargains, as wholesale genocide is committed as Zuriel's horde is unleashed upon the material plane, honoring their commitments just long enough to make their allies complacent, and then butchering them indiscriminately. Zuriel rules her domain from the Cinder Furnace, which sits within a dormant volcano. Its forges perpetually churn out even more fearsome weapons of extermination, while the ground around the furnace shudders with the passage of her armies and their war machines. Zuriel's forces long ago exhausted the energy reserves of her domain. Present day, these forges are fueled by mortal souls. And here we see the cycle. Zuriel sends her forces out into the world as mercenaries to bring back souls, to fuel her furnaces, to make more weapons, to send her forces out in the world to bring back souls, blah 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 blah, you get the idea. Zuriel's domains are evil, fire, strength, and war. Her subdomains, blood, daemon, ferocity, and tactics. Her favored weapon is the great sword, and her unholy symbol is a pale hand and her black-bladed sword. Her temples include battlefields, military hospitals, raised cities, volcanoes, and war memorials, and she is worshipped by anything from arms dealers and looters to mercenaries and warlords. Her obedience requires us to select a target or multiple targets of your wrath, studying them for a time before either slaying them in open combat with multiple witnesses or crucifying them in effigy in a public venue. In return for this, we gain a +4 profane bonus on saving throws against fire-based effects, and also we get a lot of experience / we anger a lot of town guards for running around and killing people in the name of the Horsemen of War. Zuriel's evangelist path allows us to cast Charm Person 3 times a day, Tactical Acumen twice a day, or Suggestion once a day. At level 16, we can cast Quickened Haste once per day as a spell-like ability, not bad for your fighters and barbarians and stuff. At 20th, once per day, you can invoke Zuriel's Fury, exhorting every creature within 30 feet to fly into a rage and attack your enemies, as per our quickened Song of Discord, aka walk into the tavern, press the Discord button, watch everybody lose their minds. Sounds great to me. The Exalted Path gives us Moment of Greatness 3 times a day, Burning Gaze twice a day, or once a day Fireball. At 16th, you gain Fire Resistance 30, which stacks with any other fire resistance you might have. And at 20th level, once per day, you can call down the Angel of Desolation's Wrath as Implosion. But, of course, your victim is drawn into the air, held cruciform, and then torn apart by an invisible force. The Sentinel Path will give us Mount thrice a day, War Train Mount twice a day, or Phantom Steed once a day. At 16th level, we are granted proficiency with all weapons, but we gain a +2 profane bonus on attack and damage rolls with swords, or a +4 if we use a greatsword. At 20th level, we gain a +2 profane bonus to our strength and constitution scores. Not the worst thing in the world, and all of these really are kind of giving me like the B- appeal, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it. All of them are pretty solid, some of them are pretty flavorful, but none of them are really screaming at me, hey Tommy, play a Cleric of Zuriel, take all this, it's great. Though I will say that profane bonuses are usually few and far between, so you should have no problem stacking them with whatever it is you're doing. As I said before, all 4 of the Horsemen are detailed in Bestiary 6, and Zuriel tips the scales at a whopping CR 28. As always, we're not going to dive into like every individual skill check, but we will talk about her special abilities because she's got some pretty sweet ones. First off, and this is my favorite of them, when Zuriel uses any teleportation effect, she can create a pyroclastic detonation upon arrival as a swift action. This creates a blast of fire that deals 20d6 points of fire damage to everyone within a 30-foot radius with a reflex DC of 41 for half. Zuriel can selectively omit creatures from this effect as she chooses, but why would she? She loves the carnage and death of even her own allies. To drive this home even farther, Zuriel's touch corrupts the very essence of fire, and any spell-like ability or supernatural effect used by Zuriel that normally causes fire damage deals half of that damage as fire and half of it as profane damage that is not subject to energy resistance or fire immunity. So that's basically your turn 1. You just show up, boom, 20d6 fire damage with a really impressive reflex save. If that's not explosive enough for you, if 20d6 fire damage with a huge reflex save for half isn't quite cutting the mustard, my advice is to hand out a necklace of fireballs as some sort of like non-suspicious dungeon loot that players might pick up, and then suddenly, boom, Zuriel. Of course, the necklace of fireballs has a much lower DC, however, that's a lot of D6. As a standard action, once per day, Zuriel can instill all non-daemons within a 60-foot radius of herself with a mind-twisting rage and lust for blood. Affected creatures gain a +4 morale bonus to their strength and constitution with a -2 penalty to their armor class, and they are compelled to attack the nearest creature regardless of any previous allegiances. Any creature can resist the effect with a successful DC 36 will save, otherwise it persists as long as Zuriel remains within line of sight. When the effect ends, an affected creature becomes fatigued. This is a mind-affecting compulsion effect, and it doesn't stack with Barbarian Rage because, you know, it basically is Barbarian Rage. We're just turning the party against each other. Zuriel is, of course, proficient with all weapons and is treated as a 20th level fighter for the purpose of qualifying for feats that require a minimum fighter level as a prerequisite. All 4 of the Horsemen, yeah, big surprise here, come with their own horses. We're not going to talk about them too terribly much, but we will say that the Red Horse of War can cast haste 3 times a day, and Zuriel does have Spirited Charge in her list of feats, so if you really need to clean house, that's the way to do it. Zuriel's weapon, Lamentation of the Faithless, is a black-bladed +5 speed unholy greatsword. Black-bladed, of course, again, as all you blade-bound maguses out there know, means that sword is intelligent. When using the blade to attack, Zuriel regains 1d6 hit points with each successful hit, and if she presents her sword as a standard action, all creatures within 60 feet that view it are blinded and affected by Crushing Despair for 1d4 +1 rounds, unless they succeed at a DC 30 will save. Creatures with a good subtype, as well as divine spellcasters, take a -4 penalty on this save, and as a standard action, Zuriel can call this sword to her hand from any distance across planar boundaries. Zuriel's weapon is a very powerful artifact, and it can only be destroyed if it is ever placed in an empty walled garden at the summit of Heaven's Mountain, by a risen and repentant fiend. Though I have seen this done once before in a campaign, sort of by accident, and it was with Pazuzu's weapon, I will say good luck with that. Maybe go talk to Apollyon, the Horseman of Pestilence, who we'll be talking about next week. Doesn't sound like a horrible, terrible story arc to me. After all, it's not all about butchering the bad guys. What are we, warmongers? See what I did there? Anyway, do you guys have anything to add about Zuriel? Have you used Zuriel in an encounter? Would you use Zuriel in an encounter? Have you ever passed out a bunch of necklaces of fireballs only to teleport around the place later as Zuriel, exploding them as you go and turning your player characters into teeny tiny little piles of ash? If not, I highly recommend it. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. The next episode of Wednesday Afternoon Worship drops next Wednesday.